I don't know what kind of water it is.
I think it's a mix. I think it's a mix of pump water
Yeah.
and
Thank you.
effluent from the treated effluent from the processing.
Okay, so they're doing that already then?
Believe it or
Was it a chlorine smell that you detected?
No, it was just a, it was a strange odor that when I was wiping the ball, I didn't realize that what's, going on, and the overall place had an odor like, in some place in Florida, you had a sulfur smell when they used the water, but this was beyond that. And I said, well, I wonder if that's probably the most commercialized thing in that zone, and if they're doing that, that's great, I would imagine, right?
I think they are. Besides, it's cheaper.
You also have Heritage Village, the offices, the stores, the restaurants, Yeah, there's. Hotel. Right, the hotel, there's a whole,
The hotel is encompassed in this, 466, 522, and 574 Heritage
the restaurants. and-
are all involved in this area, so zooming in, that's this
So,
But
quadrant.
the trigger is how much is stored on site.
yes, as long as
So-
you're not over the,
One type of quantity, 2.5 gallons, and then total 55 gallons.
Correct.
But there's also rules about what they can dump on their property.
well, it should be,
Just click off your mics one at a time.
I think your mic is off.
Yeah, I turned it out because it was,
That's the feedback. So,
Thanks, Donna.
Jordan, you looked at this with more detail than any of the rest of us, right, I gather. Did the water company make any attempt to actually use like normal boundaries, or they just say, this is where the stratified drift is and that's what we're gonna use?
That seems to be the case.
So it's gonna be a real pain in the neck to figure out who's covered.
Well, we have the level A map, which needed to be approved by the DEP commissioner.
Yeah,
So this went through scrutiny. Whatever they gave us is what we have as far as moving forward. From that point, now it's a matter of who's involved in the aquifer protection area, who's operating and should be at least permitted, and whether or not use before the protection agency was developed or not is something we need to determine if that's an avenue that we need to follow.
And our purpose today is to figure out if we want to change those boundaries that have been approved.
And to your point, simplifying these boundaries isn't gonna be something that's too difficult. This touches on this golf course, if it's touching on half the golf course, there's a good chance it should touch on all of it. And this is just one portion of the Heritage Golf Course. This is the Pomperaugh Golf Course up here, which is almost entirely encapsulated.
That would be.
Yeah, I would think that whatever parcel falls in that red area would have to be included, because maybe that little itty bitty corner is where they store their, we'll have to do some kind of.
Well, that's what I was saying before, because if we look at the details on the maps, it looks like they've chopped through a lot of properties.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so is there any way we can, do we have any software that can give us a list of all the properties that fall in this area, or is it?
I think
have
you're
to be-
looking at the software.
Yeah, I think you'd have to
This
pull
is
it each
it.
His
one.
name is Jordan. Yeah. So to Bill's point, like if we wanted to simplify things, you can either push it to a property boundary, a topographic feature, a road, things of that nature. So
Well, let me give you an example, okay? We have a condo, bring it, that's fine.
yeah, okay.
One of these,
You said that's fine.
okay, well, I can't see the condo.
Okay, perfect. I'll zoom out.
Give me where it says Winship Drive.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Up here. All right, Winship is,
keep going up,
it's hard to tell, actually.
keep going up.
You want me to zoom in on
farther up.
Winship?
Is this supposed to be Winship?
No, right up above.
That's a parcel line.
Okay,
Here's Winship right there.
here's Winship. We have a condo that's in here somewhere. What seems, this condo's cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
What I think kind of makes sense would be to say, we're gonna extend the boundary, I don't know if we do down here, but on this one, the boundary becomes Winship, up to the point where it crosses over. That makes this a lot easier, and this is all residential, so we don't really have to worry about it anyway,
Okay, so we're starting with that corner, let's keep going up.
okay? then when you get to
Wanna do Bach
there,
Bates Rock?
there is no logical thing to follow unless we want to start
The
following.
Well, you could follow the residential line.
Property lines or.
Yeah.
And I think we can,
Only up to a point.
I think we can expand, but we're not allowed to
We not
restrict.
contract. We can only
Okay.
expand.
So whatever we're considering, so if this small area of Parson that doesn't necessarily meet Winship so easily, it kind of crosses here, then maybe it's a matter of if we're extending it, maybe we extend it to North Poverty and call it a day.
Yeah.
So those considerations are
Or
gonna
you
have
could
to be,
go- You could go up, well, yeah.
or we could run it from
It's-
Bates Rock
Winship
to
goes
North
here.
Poverty and include everything
So
here,
one
like,
thing you could do is exactly use North Poverty and then go up to, well, there is nothing logical up here unless you use this line.
no, I think at that point.
You'd have to
if you
go
didn't-
over to Bates Rock then.
And if you didn't wanna go right to the road, you could just go to the property line. So this property here that we're just touching on, if the property line would run here. Then it would run down here, cause this property's just touched on a bit, so then
That's what I would do.
Yeah.
the line would run all the way down here.
Line to Bates,
Yeah,
and then up Bates.
and everything south of that got excluded, which is fine, cause it's not within the property boundary anyway, and we didn't expand so much that we included them unnecessarily.
If these
Yeah.
are all residential properties, isn't that kind of a moot point?
Yeah, but as an example.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Oh.
right. These are all residential. We can completely ignore it for here. I don't believe Heritage Village has any facilities along there. Their stuff is all up.
So let's keep,
Some up
let's
on
keep
the-
following the perimeter, let's keep
Yeah,
following.
you have, you just have to go up and see what's up there.
Yeah.
It's all residential, just ignore it.
So we follow Bates Rock all the way up, and then it turns
This is
in.
all residential, right?
This is, it's
Yeah.
gonna be the same matter, we're
Yeah.
gonna include this
There's a
parcel.
CL&P station at the end of Bates Rock
I
at
included-
67.
Yeah, that's at, 663 Roxbury Road, they are encompassed in,
They're exempt probably anyway, right?
they're most likely exempt, but just as far as businesses that we need to understand are,
But that's the idea. Can we, all right, we started there. Why don't we finish this up? We're saying this is all residential.
yep, so this is a vacant parcel, it appears,
Okay, well, who cares?
that it's touched on slightly, so this parcel would get consumed.
No, I think, no, let me back up. I think, given this is residential, we don't do anything with it.
Assuming
it
it
as is.
stays residential, it's zoned residential?
Leave it as is, understood.
Yeah. Why make it hard? We don't have to redefine all
Yeah.
these boundaries.
I don't think so. I'd say just follow the boundaries, and if there's something commercial or
That's what I
that
think
may
we-
have a regulated use, then include the property.
I agree. That's what I think we should do.
Okay, let's
So we'll
keep
keep
going.
climbing up, these are
Well,
vacant.
what about, I have a quick, can we just back up to the vacant lot?
Yep.
Hypothetically, and I don't know the exact zoning regulations for that, could someone in the future put a commercial, buy that vacant lot and then develop it into something
Depends on
commercial?
how it's zoned, but if they do that, that's not our problem.
But if this is
But it would
for,
be though, wouldn't it?
but wouldn't it, like, in the future, that's what I'm thinking, like, could a future company put something there
Well,
that would?
let's say they
okay.
could, okay? We don't have to anticipate that. These are published maps. The title search is done when you buy the property, should tell people that part of it's in an aquifer protection area. That's not our problem. It
And-
becomes our problem if somebody doesn't check it and they put a gas station there. Even if they get permitted by the town, then they have to come to us, because we have to approve that. If it's,
Okay.
well, yeah. And at that point, we can step in and say, you have to get a permit because you're fixing cars and you store 300 gallons of used crankcase oil.
Or we need to have a conversation with them as to how they need to store and construct their business as to maintain usability so that they don't have to have a permit, their
The initial
impervious surfaces.
impetus is on the owner
Right.
and buyer. It's sort of more self-report than anything else.
And
So
it's,
the-
Well,
The
the state,
regu-
the state has specific rules, if you read through all the stuff, somewhere that says that you're only allowed so much gasoline, so much oil, so much lubrication, oil, whatever, and it can only be so many gallons at any one given time.
Has to be
There's a-
stored.
There's a whole bunch of
Yeah.
legal,
That
legal,
applies to everybody.
So the regulations will take care of future people, we kind
Okay.
of have to gather in all the now, and make all the people aware now who are under the
And
regulations.
most of that we're gonna do by publication with reference to maps, these maps here. The regs say that we're supposed to publish the map, and we were just having this discussion. You can't publish a map in the newspaper that anybody can read,
Right.
so we're just gonna have to ignore that. I'm gonna ask Jordan to call DEP and say, your stupid regulation says this, can we just say, go to the town clerk's office and look it up?
It's gonna be an expensive posting if it's a
We
full
can't
map.
publish maps.
exactly.
They won't do it.
So, Bill, let's say commercial is unlikely, but let's say that 6-acre parcel wants to put in a large housing development that's on a septic system,
Mhm.
which would then,
Covered.
huh? Not covered, so it won't impact it at all? Good. Okay.
If our first goal this evening is to agree upon a map, can we overlay this with either a commercial zoning thing or a residential zoning thing and see if any of the perimeter of it, is commercial, and then we'll have to see if we wanna include the bulk of that
Yeah,
property?
I think.
I mean,
no,
if that's the first goal, I think that'd be the easiest way to
Right.
get there.
I don't disagree. If there's a way to do that.
So let the map think for a second, because it should be.
So.
And you touched
is this
on,
the
one-
area? Oh, they did get the park.
Settlers Park is included, yeah.
Yeah. Now, in this area.
So there's your answer,
There
Carl.
is a commercial operation.
We have R30A, we have B3 touching on whatever DD17
Okay, so that's an area of concern.
comes up as. So the south end of this is the Heritage. And then moving over to the training school, the map has to think again.
Here? Looks like it's actually the same boundary.
It's just not loading yet.
okay, so there's nothing commercial.
R30A just barely touches it, but for the most part, R60 and R80, so.
Our
the-
only real concerns is this southwest corner of Aquifer A, if that's what you wanna call it.
We can call it Aquifer A, so that pertains to the Heritage Village
So,
in the southern end. But to that point, the Kevin Bennett soil site on Old Farm Road, Old Field Road, that's included in the aquifer map that we're looking at right now. That requires a permit to maintain a permitted activity. The ONG plant, from when I spoke with,
I'm just talking about the perimeter now,
okay,
as far as expanding the perimeter to include the bulk of, entirety of those.
understood. So the
Those
perimeter
properties.
change that's where our focus is.
I think so.
Yeah, and this makes it very simple, to your point.
So if we go up here, the only area of real concern here would be coming through Heritage Village and what the village is doing and where their stuff is. Maybe we want to expand this area
South?
going up.
Because we already kind of discussed the Bates Rock expansion, that makes sense.
I think just for simplicity for us.
Right, and that does encompass, the Heritage Village condos.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one that's worth doing,
I'd say so.
because it's easy,
Mhm.
it covers that whole area.
And it's not gonna be a full swath, we kind of discussed moving in along this path, if you follow my cursor, and then following the residential parcels.
I think that might, do we agree that kind of makes sense, or is it,
That-
given
those-
that it's residential?
I
it
don't
is.
understand, yeah, being residential and condos, they're not gonna be apt to be doing any sort of regulated activities in there. Well, I'm not
No, I think that's
sure
right.
why that's necessary.
The
My-
only- the commercial type activities at the village are not there. They're up the mountain, up the hill.
Up on the top of At the hill, they have a maintenance shed up there. They have
Well,
a-
if you're,
Yeah.
For down by the sewer, the septic plant.
Right,
We wanna make sure that's
and the
covered.
old bazaar area there,
if you're
Yeah.
considering
that commercial
zones,
area,
That's all commercial,
yeah.
so can we take a look at that?
That PDD 17 there?
Yeah, and B3.
Where are we going, Bill?
Yeah, I think we wanna look, I'm not sure what's where, in here.
Okay.
We're trying to find out where the village has commercial operations. The area immediately of concern is what Carl identified, it's that whole area down by the hotel, and they have a couple of maintenance facilities
All the way down
there,
to the water treatment
and the
plant.
septic treatment plant.
Yep. So that's everything south of that boundary right there. I can put on the overlay in that sense. So the water treatment plant is down here.
Okay, so I think if we're trying to protect the aquifer, it makes an awful lot of sense to cover all of this.
Yeah.
And you can then change the boundary, take it up to the stream.
You would encompass this portion of the Heritage Golf Course,
Yeah, which is fine. That
which is
doesn't-
fine, but
That's
that,
no burden on anybody.
it really isn't.
And if we can get this protected, then we will have some control over what they're doing down there, which right now
Well,
isn't covered.
It'll help
except
protect
as we
surface
described
water,
earlier,
too.
that, don't forget that the golf courses are pouring a lot of water, and the quality of the water, what they have in the water, and where the water comes from is an important part of the stuff that they're dumping on that area.
Well, more significantly, yes, but it's important for aquifer protection in that they're treating it chemically, and we don't know what's coming in the effluent most of the time, which could be going anywhere within the aquifer protection area. That's our justification for changing the boundary. Pardon me? Yeah, fertilizer.
So it's safe,
Chlorine.
it's safe to say this water course
That's the Pompog River.
would be a boundary all the way down to the southern end
Yeah, to
where it
Heritage
meets Heritage Road.
Yeah.
And then it would travel back north and essentially encompass the B3 PDD 17, as well as this other B3 zone that it just touches on slightly up here, if you see. This commercial building is touched on slightly. I'd have to zoom in real tight here to determine if that's being included. So
Well, I think that would kind of make sense. If we went up Heritage
it's not a
Road-
large business zone, but to include it wouldn't be too much of a push. And you would get all the businesses, business zones within this aquifer
I think that
area.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Everything else is residential.
In that case, I think it does, because the use of those buildings there, those could change to something
Absolutely.
else in the
They change
future.
about every 3 weeks.
Well, true. For the most part, I think they're office-related, but that doesn't mean it couldn't be something
Well,
else.
yeah. It used to be Friendlies. What could be more
That's right.
toxic than that?
That's right.
Here's a good question. Are we concerned with PDD number 1?
What is that?
Where's that at?
PDD number 1 is the old Canpack building. Still existing.
Absolute,
Oh,
well,
I understand that the Heritage Village PDD number 7, I don't even think, that's the Oldfield condos, isn't it?
That's condos, isn't it?
that's kind of.
Not too much of a concern, so we wouldn't necessarily push that
That's the old
direction.
ice cream factory or whatever there,
This is the old ice
PDD1?
cream factory,
And-
It's
exactly.
an ice cream factory?
Well, they probably have permits in place, but
That's the other thing.
They're outside.
If they are doing anything at Canpack,
Yeah.
if that's what it still is, they've got to have a NIMBY's permit. In which case, the state worries about it, not us.
yeah.
And the rest of it's residential.
And the rest of it is residential.
Well, they may have a discharge permit, but as far as chemical storage,
Well, I know, but how far do you want to get from the, remember,
yeah,
it's the
they,
aquifer.
yeah, I know. Yeah,
Now, the only thing with that is, behind this, I don't know where Canpack is,
PDD number 1, Bill.
yeah, but I think this is the stream. This thing fills up every time it rains. If they have a discharge or a release here, it's gonna get into the stream, which is uncontrolled, and it goes right down the river, which is within the active protection area.
so are you saying we do want to include
No,
it?
I'm saying, I don't know. Do we want to bother?
Ah,
I mean, when they cut the site, if they change?
I'd
Well, it
say,
had-
sure,
My-
I'd love
My
to.
guess is
manufacturing.
Or would they have a hard, if they saw this map, they'd be like, you can't just extend it and include us? Right? Might they have a hard time?
If we petition the state to do that, I have to think about it. Petition the state to do it, they can go and essentially appeal and say, this is stupid, it's nowhere near the aquifer protection area.
But it
All
go-
we do is make, well, I knew a guy was gonna buy it, he was gonna store lumber in it, okay? All we do is store lumber, this is idiotic, don't put this burden on us.
Well, it won't unless, there
Within-
won't be a burden
Well,
until they
that's-
start storing.
That's the correct argument, I
Right.
think. It's no
But-
burden if you don't do anything.
Right, but
Right.
you'll probably hold the whole thing up. Because if I'm visualizing owning that property, I didn't wanna see any type of restriction, which is
The owner,
typical knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, well, do
Then-
we care?
which is fair,
Well,
And-
hold up the whole modification we're doing now.
And if you're gonna include that, you're gonna have to add these other properties in between the two as
Correct.
well.
You gotta configure it.
So then you're gonna,
continuously.
then you're kinda talking about moving it over to Oldfield Road or something and,
That's correct.
But then,
No,
but then, are
Main
we,
Street.
well,
To Main Street, because the Canpack is off Main Street.
Yeah.
It's between Main Street.
so
and
you
Oak.
either gotta go over to Oldfield and go around it, or go,
Yep, you'd have to go over Crookhorn.
is the
you'd
property,
have to go to Pine Hill.
it does state in the regs that no person may challenge the boundaries of an aquifer protection area under the Aquifer Protection Act regulations unless such challenge is based solely on a failure by the agency, all of you guys, to properly delineate the boundaries in accordance with Connecticut State Statute 22A-354N of the Connecticut General
That's
Statutes.
once it's passed, but they do have a right to go in and
Appeal prior to that?
challenge our change of the boundary.
Got it.
well,
Is-
if you're saying this though, with this, you know, all the water flows downhill, so every single brook is going pretty much into the Pomperog or,
Yeah, you can't designate, I don't think we could designate the entire town.
well, I'm saying you're taking a place and then saying, well, what they could do
Yeah.
there in that business district could flow all the way down that little brook and into the Pomperog River.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that would be in the aquifer then, whatever stuff.
Jordan,
there are a lot
So
could
the-
you pull that map down a little?
So the question is, you know, that
The other
could
way.
apply to a lot of different places around town.
Right.
That where they are is not in the aquifer protection area. However, the water that drains through their property ends up in the Pomperog.
Yeah, right, which is in the aquifer protection area. I think that's one of the things we do wanna consider.
Well, I think you're expanding the scope of this tremendously.
Well, maybe we are, maybe we don't
Could
wanna do that.
someone remotely construe it like spot zoning, you know?
Well, it's kind of, but not really. But this is already commercial. This is an empty land that somebody could change. This is already there. The only reason they're not covered is because, the water company doesn't have any wells in here.
Municipal boundaries are also something that you can utilize to extend a boundary,
Yeah.
and I would
We could go.
state that a
If we wanna
PDD,
get Canpack, we could go over Oldfield Hill. This is all residential. Which, no, they don't do their own mowing, somebody else does it. They do have a pool though. Down to, okay. Here's Canpack. They take it across their property line. And I don't know how you get it back up. I guess you can take it over to the river.
we're taking it over to the river regardless,
You can take it over to the river.
whether or not we include, I guess, this small parcel here, or we go,
It's too hard to carve it out, just leave.
Are there
You're
no-
gonna pick up my house here, I don't care. You have it anyway, because our back is in actually the
got it,
area.
yep.
So I have to get rid of that diesel tank I have buried in the backyard.
I was gonna cite you for that, but that's fine.
Well, it's not that old. So do we wanna do that?
Well, since there aren't many other areas in town that are that close at least I'm aware of, that close to an aquifer protection area. And since we are in the business of protecting surface waters too, although this is a different exercise,
Well, before I commit myself to that question, let me ask a follow-up one. Are there other water courses that flow through off aquifer commercial properties and then go into the aquifer, or is this the only one we're identifying?
I would
yeah,
wager,
it kinda gets to what you were saying too.
wager to bet ONG.
Because, you know, if you're gonna do it for one, you really gotta do it for all of them, if there is any more.
So ONG and Kevin Bennett's site down here. So
Yeah, but
Kevin
that's
Bennett's-
residential, I think.
His is residential, you're
And
right.
how close is it to, is that layer on the, oh, it's right in the, it's
in-
already covered,
It's already covered, you're right.
all right.
So ONG up north,
They would,
ONG
Airworks.
is,
flow into the Pomperaug
ONG
River.
is covered.
Yeah, ONG's covered.
ONG is covered.
So it looks
we
like
can-
it
So
was
that's it?
On this aquifer, that's the only one.
Right.
okay.
I said, let's do it.
These
I'm-
are all
I'm for it.
residential.
Okay?
I would have to agree with Donna, because I think we'd be remiss if something ever did happen, and they said, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
And they look back on what we
And
decided.
nobody checked and.
And
Yeah, the other
PDD
thing-
one can become anything in the future. They'd have to change the regulations, but the fact of the matter is,
It could.
it absolutely could. It's
Zoning
it's
right
zoned
now
for
is-
manufacturing,
It's commercial and they can.
and if someone wants to change that, it's
Okay.
coddled in a residential area, but they carved out an area for manufacturing, and that could change.
What was
So I'm
interesting,
for it. That,
That top up there next to ONG, I would move that boundary over to the river,
That's good.
why?
all the way down the river, because if, you know, any of that stuff comes through that area and everything, it's going right down the river.
Well, ONG is exempt anyway.
Yeah, but you don't know what's gonna, are they gonna be exempt 50 years from now?
No, I don't
I'm
think ONG is
unsure if they're exempt, to be honest, Bill. When, in speaking with the woman from the DEP, just getting some preliminary information leading us into this stage, she was under the impression that ONG was permitted
Yeah,
at,
they have, it's
at a
required.
time.
They have to have an empty.
No, permitted through the Aquifer Protection Act, but they, I don't think, have maintained that permit.
Well, you know, last night I was doing some reading and I was curious what Woodbury does. And they've had their aquifer protection agency working for, since I think 2019. So I went in and I read their minutes. And they meet on a quarterly basis, and most of their meetings are canceled except for a December meeting. And so I went in and I read their minutes. And ONG went in, I guess their permit canceled, and they went before the agency to re-permit. And they had A through F activities that fell under the regulations. And the agency came back and said, well, actually, like D and E are actually in Southbury. So we only have to permit you for A, B, C, and G. So, and so who knows, I didn't get
Well,
into all
so
this.
they're covered.
So they're,
But the map shows they're covered. I'm assuming
yeah,
this line up is supposed to go to the,
This is the Woodbury
Border?
town line, yep. Everywhere that you don't see in a shaded is outside of Southbury's town
and-
line.
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Apparently, it doesn't quite go all the way to the border.
Oh, the Aquifer Protection?
So
Area?
I think we should move it to the border.
That's, yeah, I agree. And if that's,
Now, whether we want to move it
seems to
to
be
the
the case
river
here.
is another question. And you think we ought to move to the river?
it seems a logical boundary at that point.
I wouldn't disagree with that. It's easy to, we're not cutting through the woods.
No, and I was gonna mention one other thing in reading about the Heritage Village, and, does anyone know what the historical use of Camp-Pac was?
Yeah.
Ice cream,
all the way back.
Ice cream.
That was the
But
original.
They never switched anything?
It's been,
So
yeah.
it's been more or less vacant. They just amended the regulations to that PDD to allow for one additional business to come in. So now 2 businesses currently operate out of that, and the second business is a dry goods
Okay.
They're
warehouse.
advertising space available over
It
there.
could be, it could be a machine shop.
Because
Wait, isn't it the same fellow who we just did a site?
You are correct. That is Mike DePompe from 1200 Main Street, which we're dealing with the cease and
the reason
desist.
why I asked, and maybe I'm wrong, but I thought I read that zoning was suspended or gone when the village was
It was
It
for
was.
a few
a
years.
year and a half or so.
And that's why I wonder what historically the use of something like Canpac was during that
It
time.
was,
Because they,
It was here prior to that.
it was prior to that, and when I came here in 91, it was Baskin Robbins ice cream.
okay,
Yeah.
so I was just saying, could someone
That was it.
stretch the concept of saying zoning was suspended? You know, I did this during that time, it's still continuous operation, maybe I could do something.
It's not continuous.
Okay, so that's good.
So they've interrupted the usage.
Okay, so we're
But
good.
So, okay,
Going back.
here's the first question. Do we agree that we're gonna come up with a boundary that includes Canpac? A, yes?
Fine.
Okay, and then B, that boundary is going to be up Oldfield Road, and how far do you wanna go? We can make a property line for that property, or we can take it all the way up to Oldfield Hill Road, which is the condos.
Well, we're already proposing to extend the Heritage Village thing down to Heritage Road
Let's
there.
get to that.
Well, I'm just trying to make it
By
make sense with
comparison.
that.
Okay, that makes sense, okay.
That's all.
So
If
you're
that
saying-
helps us
My
somehow.
cursor is on the Canpac building right now.
So we're gonna move this down to here, correct?
Yep.
And then up the river.
And then,
Canpac is here,
and go to their southern property line and go straight across to the river, I guess.
I think that's fine.
That's,
You can take it like that. I don't know whose house that is.
That doesn't look like a house. That looks like
It's a house.
town of
That's the
Southbury.
pool at Ballantine.
Ballantine
Oh,
Park,
wow.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is in the process of being
Yeah, that
redone.
whole survey thing's going on.
Do
So we wanna
we,
just, what boundary do you guys wanna use? That's the pool. We could take it to the property line for that, down Oldfield, then over the property line.
Yeah, that probably makes sense.
Okay, so it comes across.
Probably
the
makes
property
sense to
line,
include the pool.
Canpac, comes down Oldfield
Although-
Road to the town municipal property line, which is actually the end of Valentine, which is here, and then over, I don't know whose property line this
Yeah,
is, all the
that's
way around.
fine.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
this is Ballantine, this seems to be a residential. so
Yeah,
they
that's
won't-
all residential in
They
there.
won't be included.
No, that won't be, well,
So where do we push across? Are we pushing all the way to Main Street north here, in this northern portion where my cursor is? All the way down?
Is
Are we
that,
going-
it's all residential
Yeah,
up
you
there?
might
We're
as
going like
well.
this?
Otherwise, it looks kind of,
Is this the kind of
that's-
expansion?
We'll that up there as residential. The other option, I guess, would be to go over this line.
Otherwise, you're extending it just to grab this.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what
exactly.
we're doing anyway.
That's what we're looking at. Okay, so this stays the same. Then
Bring that down to that point. and then
cut
over
across,
Oldfield,
down Oldfield, then across this.
then their property line.
Will encompass all of it to
Should
Main
be
Street
just the
North.
PDD, or whatever you call it.
PDD
Yeah, the
number
whole
one,
zone,
yeah.
Maybe the whole zone.
And then we are going down along Ballantine and then back to the river where we consume the rest of the original talk about Bates Rock.
It's findable, identifiable.
I mean, would it look more fair-handed if, I know it's all resident, well, I guess because it's residential, we don't, it's zoned residential, right?
Yes, no, Chris.
So we just have to kick it out and, okay.
There are some limits, you know, there's.
So
there are a lot of
PDD
people up there that
7?
have animals. On the east side of North Main Street, there are farms. You know they have tractors and fuel, and a lot of them take care of their own machinery. We're not going after that.
No.
Is a PDD strictly considered residential, or is it considered a special zoning area?
Special zoning, I think, isn't it?
Exactly that.
So then,
PDD
You're-
7 and 1?
you have two PDDs next to each other,
And you're omitting
you
one.
might as well just include the two of them
Yeah,
That's
at
what I'm
that
thinking.
point.
yeah.
Which is the other one?
So you're looking at
The
the,
can pack is a
Oldfield
PDD,
condos.
and then condos is a
Condos.
PDD.
Do them both.
So then,
Then you can just go over Kirkland.
Yeah, let's go up. Extend
those,
it north.
and those properties shouldn't really have any statement of this is egregious, because they're already included. We're just expanding.
Well, the ones on Oldfield and Kirkland are not.
No, these residential properties are already, they're partially
Backside,
consumed, so
yeah.
we're gonna fully consume them. Have it cross Oldfield Hill Road,
Down Main
have it go down Main Street, stop at the south end of PDD one, cut across to the west, then go down south along Oldfield Road until we hit, you know, the property boundary of Ballantine Park, which would take us to the river.
Make sense?
I think so.
Rob, you good?
And then at the top,
I'm good.
make sure it goes over to the river.
Yeah.
And then we do wanna
Yeah,
include this, we're pushing north, so it actually
The property.
pushes up to our Southbury town
All
line.
the way to this.
We're going to
Down there, yeah.
include this river, and just for the sake of discussing all the expansions, we are going to expand along North Poverty Road, correct?
Yes.
And that's essentially it, we're gonna extend north until
To the existing line.
the existing line. We're not gonna worry about, you know, squaring these lines to be 90 degrees, because they're residential, we don't mind. We're just gonna expand to North Poverty. And while we're here, we're gonna make sure that the expansion along North Poverty cuts down, and before we, you know, we're gonna consume B3
Yeah,
as well. In
Yep.
riding up Heritage Road, we're going to include this portion of B3 that's across the street from
I
the
think
Heritage
that
Hotel.
makes sense.
I think that makes
Yep.
sense.
Okay. All right, so this southern portion is gonna have the most, really, expansion involved. It's gonna, you know,
Yeah.
include all of this area as well as the PDDs. And it's gonna ride right along Oldfield, okay. And the Southbury Training School,
Let me ask one question. So this is all contingent on the water company, where they're taking water out of. What happens if their plans change and they need more water, or they need to expand, or whatever? I mean, how does that work? Do we then redefine the aquifer?
the aquifer remains the same. It's a,
Even though the aquifer company is
Nope.
having to expand because they don't have enough water or whatever?
Think of that as a soils map. The soils isn't gonna change, where they pump out from might change,
Doesn't
but the geology isn't gonna change.
and the geology is what's dictating this being an aquifer. So nothing they can do can change. They can operate within or without, but this will always remain our primary aquifer for Southbury. Now, not to dive too far down, you know, the rabbit hole, but Southbury Training School, there have been a number of considerations as to what to do with that. God knows what's gonna happen with it in the future, but
No, we have to consider that.
if it becomes developed, if it becomes sold off, if any portion of it tries to revamp and do something along the lines of what Newtown is doing
How's it
with the
zoned right now?
asylum, it's currently an R
80,
eighty, R 60.
probably 80, some of each.
Some of each, exactly.
What is R60 and 80?
R60 is residential,
60,000 square feet per building lot, or 80,000 square feet per building lot.
So most residential in Southbury is R60. R80 is kind of where you go towards the purchase.
Yeah.
You get a lot of more farmland.
Mhm.
the real issue is not that, really for us, is not how it's zoned now, but what could be done there in the future, particularly at the training school. Are there areas that would be of concern, or we might want to expand act for protection area? It's the same question.
So this is,
Well, the only thing that would make sense then would be to expand it to the perimeter of the property, I guess.
I think that might be a good idea.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
there's a lot of waterways that are included in that. They all feed into the aquifer area.
Can we tell where the training school property is?
I can't get the box to go away, but just understand it goes all the way north here. There's kind of a little flag portion of this lot. But for our, oh, there we go.
Yeah, let's just, is that
So
too
would-
much, you think? Is that
If
too
we
large?
include the
an
whole thing that's
expansion?
surrounded by blue,
Mm.
plus the red on the right side?
Correct. So everything in blue is the training school, Connecticut-owned property, 635.11 acres. When we consider everything that's on the right, this is Traditions Boulevard, so this is Traditions here. We have the cemetery, the Pierce Hollow Cemetery, and this is all Connecticut state-owned land as well. Just kinda training school across the street. It's not.
Would it make any sense to, if we use the property line, does it make any sense to kind of tie that northeast corner into the existing corner up
Yeah, really.
there,
Mm.
like Flag Swamp? Or is it just for simplicity?
What
not
I think if you're worried about redevelopment, you might as well just go with the property line.
Yeah.
If that's what our concern is,
Yeah.
that it will eventually become an airport or something over there.
Cause it's we have the right,
There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, that's all down next to the road, which is already in the middle of it, right? It's just,
That's just, it could be anything up there.
well, I mean, that's true, but we could carry that thought forward to the whole town
This is
essentially.
Relatively simple.
But there's a higher probability that something on a large scale will happen with that property.
probably the highest in Southbury. When you're
Yes,
considering
For the
developable
size
land.
of the piece of property.
Eyes are on this for
Exactly.
big developments, and we are well within our rights to expand to the
I think
nearest property boundary, which in this case is hundreds of acres.
Yeah.
However,
I think that's what you have to put in with the application to the commissioner as to why we would like to do that. Because you have to explain, you have to sort of explain these changes, right? When you're,
Land trust.
I'm sorry?
The land is in a land trust.
that's not in perpetuity, though.
Yeah, it's in perpetuity.
Does that matter?
Only if it's protected from development in perpetuity, and I don't know the answer to that.
A lot of our land trusts
I
have,
was
like-
under the impression it wasn't land trust, but it was being leased by the state agriculture department to area farmers.
Well, yeah, we know that.
Isn't that what's going on up
That's
there?
what, Dan's leasing some of it.
Right.
Yeah, they have apple orchards
And-
up there
Yeah,
and
that's
all
not
sorts of
necessarily-
I don't think
consistent
it's
with
land
land
trust
trust,
because it's
but I don't
state
think they own
property.
They got both cars.
They got both up there?
They're renting out to farmers and they also have a large piece which is an actual land trust.
I don't see why it would prohibit us from extending the boundaries.
Well, yeah, I think we don't want a tractor repair facility up there, even if it's for the farmers.
I think that's the only way that makes sense with that piece of property is if that's what we're trying to do, is just extend it to the entire property. As the land trust certainly won't be opposed to,
Protecting it?
yeah, exactly, and they're not gonna do anything as far as development goes, so it should be a non-issue for them.
But Bill, were you also saying move you see where Deer Hill Road is?
I guess
Is
that
the-
doesn't really make that much difference.
You wonder why that little peninsula is there?
Sorry, Donna, where are you?
On the right-hand side, Deer Hill Road,
You see Deer Hill Road?
Bring it down a little.
bring it up.
Saying down.
Up is down,
I'm
right?
thinking maybe back, connect up here just to simplify property lines.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of this, take out the
Yeah.
peninsula.
Oh, understood. So draw the line right across.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, because those properties are rented anyway.
They're already within it anyway.
I think just for simplicity's sake, that kind of makes sense. Should we vote on it? Should we? Okay, done. Moved, seconded, and passed, Joe.
I'm sorry?
Moved, seconded, and passed. Take out the peninsula and connect the.
Got it, Sonia?
Property
We got it.
lines.
So this whole thing will essentially become
Yeah.
this area.
So the only other area to be concerned about, I guess, is what's down here.
Really just mainly residential. This goes just north of Heritage Village.
Okay,
You look at the village right here, it just cuts off.
that's all residential.
This is all residential.
In that lower piece, the old, Personnel Village, I think that is,
About this swath.
yeah, just to the left there where it says Village Road in that circle where they had the cottage burned down there a couple weeks ago, whatever it was. That, I think, is in the housing, senior housing or something, isn't it? That piece?
You're right, they had a proposal with
And
state
is that why it
funding.
doesn't show up as state of Connecticut, or is that state?
No,
of-
I just clicked on it and it does, so
Okay.
if you wanna consider this as well, like I said, the state of Connecticut had, 2 parcels across the street, training schools over here.
Okay.
So
I-
state of Connecticut consumes most of this area, other than the Pierce Hollow Cemetery,
Okay.
which is cut out here. This is
Uh,
all state of Connecticut,
that
this could all be
probably
developed.
Would
This
be
is,
well advised to include that as well.
Yeah, that's a good
this is the
idea.
Cap'n property. I've had some proposals for developments be put in there as well, but it's all residential. But for the sake of what you're considering, this Connecticut state-owned property.
Now, of course, the state is probably exempted from all of this anyway, so we
Right.
we probably are just, if they choose to do it, but if it
I think they can
changes hands, then that's a
override us.
different story.
I wonder how a Newtown has done this, because they've obviously, they're not finished, but they're in the transition process to turning it back into
Now, that
different,
may or may not be an aquifer where that is over there.
well,
The
there is a river.
Fairfield
up-
Hills you're
there's a
talking?
river down at the bottom of the road, and,
Fairfield Hills?
yeah,
Yeah, but up where the buildings are is not gonna have stratified drift geology. That's gonna be down by the river.
So are you looking to propose to include 1230 South Britain Road as it's
Yeah, I'm gonna
highlighted?
make that proposal.
So, you're saying, run this way?
Yeah, I'm saying all that state property over there, we might as well just go with the borders of it.
What about the Pierce Hollow Cemetery? Okay.
no dumping oil on the stones.
Well, anyway,
Cemeteries have the right to condemn land next to it, to expand, just like public. It's an amazing right they have.
that's ridiculous.
Oh, yes. Eminent domain, just like take it and expand.
That's horrible.
Oh, yes, and cemetery land is very valuable.
Yeah, well, yeah, there isn't much, but cemeteries are also
historic cemetery too, so God knows what they were burying people with back then.
They're better, they weren't using as much formaldehyde. I'm serious. Okay, so that's that. What about coming up this way? What's up, that's all residential?
All residential, all the way out to the four corners.
Looking up here, Bill?
All that.
Yep.
You're getting pretty far
Do
away.
we want to bother trying to simplify it, or just leave it the way it is? A lot of people are gonna have part of their property in the protected area. I don't know if it's even worth bothering with.
I don't think it's an issue for residential properties.
No, I don't either.
Otherwise, you just have to,
So we just leave it alone then?
This is privately owned. Residential.
It's all within the protected area, so I don't really care.
Because don't we already have rules and regulations about, you know, you have a shed out and back, you can't fill it up with gasoline
Yeah, we already have that.
and oil and all that stuff, so,
This is just an extra level of scrutiny
right.
for the purpose of protecting the aquifer.
And no one's gonna report that kind of stuff anyway.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Not, if somebody puts a fuel tank in to run their car when the price of gas goes to $10.
Their
a
generator
gallon,
or anything like that.
Yeah, but I've had two friends now that where I live, and they had, the town ordered them to pull the tanks out of the ground and put them in their basement.
Yeah, because
Well,
they knew about it.
one of them had to put it in his garage, and the other one put it in his basement. These were houses that were built 45 years
The
ago.
life expectancy of the tank, there's a
20
state law
years
that
or
caps 20 years or less. It has to be removed by law.
Yeah, and then they said they couldn't put a new tank in the ground where the old one is. It has to go above ground.
Well, that's right. I think you can put one in the ground, but it's gotta be double walled with a detection
Yeah,
system.
yeah, without going.
Plus about $20,000.
Right, extra, yeah, so it's,
I know this because I had to replace mine last week.
Oh, wow.
Wasn't in the ground. So, okay, so we're gonna just leave this alone? Let these people worry about it when
I
they
think so.
sell their houses? Okay. How about up, well, there's nothing out of the flag spawn area. And the only reason to change any of this at this point is just for simplicity and for people to sell their houses. Nothing else, no other areas of concern?
well, that brings me to another question. Earlier, you mentioned something which, it was kind of in one of my notes, and you said something to the effect of that when a person goes to buy one of these properties, it will show up in the title search.
Well, it won't necessarily.
Well, that was my question is, do we need to put some kind of a notation, have a notation put in, or do we do this with only the property owners that end up registering a permit with us? That should probably be put forward into the title search, because there's also a requirement that they have to go through when they go to change ownership to get the permit sent to the next person.
Right, that will happen for the ones that are permitted. It's the ones that aren't permitted that, as far as I know, nobody's gonna dig, on a residential property, is gonna dig into these on a title search to find out if it's in an aquifer protection area.
Okay.
It probably won't come up in the title search, but the person that'll hit it first will be the bank, just like they ask for flood insurance. So the scrutiny will be right at that point.
Or if
When
they,
you go for your mortgage, they'll say, oh, yeah, is it in a flood zone? Oh,
I
is
think
it?
that's what they're gonna do.
Yes,
I agree. I know they
absolutely.
did the flood zone, because they did that to my house 30
I
years
know,
ago.
it's,
Is it in an aquifer?
so those are the ones who really dig deep and scrutinize at the banks.
And if it is, you know, report, I don't know what they do. If you say, yes, well, I'm in an aquifer protection area, I guess you say, and it's residential property and fully
Well,
compliant.
then they ask for the legal opinion, and is it okay? And it's,
Just like the flood zone.
yes, except you have to get flood insurance, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we're set on proposed changes to the maps, do you want to discuss some of the other, do you want to go through some of this and
I
have a
don't.
question and answer, or you want to call it for the night?
I think, well, it's, yeah, we got some time if you want. We have to get it, we have to get it defined, hopefully get it up to deep, and get a response back in time that we can publish it without having to publish twice. If I read this correctly, we have 120
20 days.
days to publish the original map or the amended map,
We can get it back
if
from
we
the
can
state.
get it back in time. If we can't,
How far into the 120 days are we?
I don't know that. Depends upon when we got the map.
I'm looking at the last meeting, right?
I think it's about a month, right, roughly? So we're 30 days into the 120, 3 months left. That should be enough
Okay, so
time,
the
even for deep, to,
The first thing is to get the map published, and then do we still have time to discuss the regulations and procedures?
yeah, we have time to do that.
Okay.
So we have to notify people? Which comes first?
We have to submit a public notice and have the map be on file with the town clerk, that they can come and review it at any time.
Before we notify anybody?
Before we notify
Before we have
anyone, we'll
a
need
public
the
notice.
approved
Right.
map that we submit.
Plus, how about, you know how you have the maps on the side of the wall?
Here's what the regulation says. All right. Boundaries shall be delineated within 120 days. Notice of delineation shall be published in a newspaper having substantial circulation and shall include a map or a detailed description, which would have to be a meets and bounds, which we're not gonna do, and then a contact. Okay? But if we go with something other than the original map, which is what we're discussing today, then no later than 60 days after receiving the commissioner's written approval of the request to extend the area, then you have to delineate and publish again, if you've already published. So I'm just kind of hoping we can get it done and do it once.
Right. Okay.
But so
If
So
it
you
does-
could put it in the Voices and, or the Waterbury Republican American, you don't have to put it in both.
Correct. But you do have, it gets to be a royal pain in the ass, because you have to if it's approved, you've got to notify people, you've got to post signs. There's a whole bunch of rigmarole you have to go through.
Well,
But the first thing is to get it
posting signs-
delineated.
Posting signs around this thing is impossible.
Well, let me see if I can find the sign piece.
Why is it impossible?
I don't think I
All those-
called that out.
All those different, to put out, as it is, it's hard to put out all the, the wetland area markers, and that's one thing at a time.
Well, they're not permanent. Do we just mean,
Could you just post a sign at each road that
A notice.
enters it and say you are entering an aquifer protection district for information?
You've seen them.
Contact the town
'Cause
clerk,
they have
rather than
watershed.
trying to
Yeah.
go, you can't go to every property, but each street that enters or something like that, maybe?
You don't need to do that.
You don't need to do that?
No.
Okay.
There is
I have
something
seen
about
those before. You've gone through
notifying-
towns, yeah.
You have or you haven't?
I have seen you are entering an aquifer protection area.
Yeah,
Like they're all throughout towns, whether or
It's
not
like
we.
a
but it's a
watershed
question of what you
protection.
have to do versus what
Yeah, down on
Yep.
the
makes sense to do.
Correct.
Yeah.
If I can find the notice piece.
I read something last night
Right now, I can't.
that was interesting. It was, they had a paper about Bristol's approach. The Aquifer Protection Agency worked with the Chamber of Commerce to introduce people to the idea. It's a bigger town, maybe their business district is more within an aquifer protection area, but they did it as a team approach, and it was well received by people who fell within the aquifer protection area.
That's a good way to get the word out, for sure,
Okay,
to businesses.
here it is. We have to notify the people where we have extended the original aquifer protection area. This is section 3A, 3B, never mind, doesn't matter. It's on page 10 of this thing. And that has to show, that has to include a map with the proposed extensions, and then contact information, a statement that they have 30 days to submit comments. So once we get this done, oh, what a pain in the ass this is.
No, you aren't kidding, and that's just the beginning of this.
You don't know how many,
The
you don't even know
administrative-
how many houses are affected by this.
Well, that's, right. So we have to identify any that are within the area where we've extended
Residential
the
too?
boundary. Everybody.
Anybody, any property owner,
And they
right?
have 30 days to submit comments.
Where are you reading from, sir?
It's section 3B1B.
And what were you reading from?
It's from the regulations, Connecticut State.
Aquifer protection regulations.
The model municipal
Model.
regulations, aquifer protection area, October 1, 2010 revision.
So people may not agree with our extensions.
They may not, and they can complain, but then we don't have to do what they say, what they want. We simply have to explain why we're doing it.
And, you know, once we explain it, then it'll probably make it a little easier for them to understand why we're doing it.
And then we have to submit all that, their comments, our response goes to DEEP, and DEEP has to decide whether they agree with us or not. I don't know what happens if they don't agree with us.
Probably keep the maps as is.
Yeah.
Well, they might do that, but they might send it back and say that's too big. I just don't know what they're gonna do.
Well, there's no engineering here. That's my first question. Where's the engineering?
There's no
You're
engineering,
just moving lines all over.
right? For,
But the area to which you're moving the line has not been engineered.
How do you mean
it's not
engineered?
going to be.
How
We're
do
not
you
gonna go out and
I
do a
know
study.
it's being done.
This is for convenience for the commission and for enforcement. It has nothing to do with the scientific legitimacy of the delineation.
Well, I understand that, but like you said, if you want to sell your house, and you're now by deed in an aquifer protection area, and the buyer sees it and goes running his tail, yeah, you have impacted every single individual who owns property.
Potentially, but if you're in a, if you're, it's a lot like being in a floodplain, okay? Nobody goes out and tells everybody they're in a floodplain.
But homeowners, if anything, it's gonna increase the value.
No, it will not increase the value.
Well, I would think that very few homeowners would store 2.5 gallons of one type of hazardous substance, or a 55-gallon drum. I
There's
don't,
no hydrology, there's no nothing
And
happening.
there's not going to be.
You're just moving lines around.
That's correct.
The purpose of moving the lines around is to contain uses and potential uses in order to protect the aquifer from any potential contamination.
Pardon me?
well, we're all,
Taking the
We
property.
need to maintain decorum,
We
that's
are-
for sure.
This is a discussion, this is not the place to have this discussion. So,
and the use is regulated under those regulations. So, but we're also putting it out for public comment, so if the public disagrees, we'll explain
we'll
our, you know.
consider it.
Yeah,
That's the point of having the opportunity for public comment.
Yeah.
I don't want to do it because someone might want to put a gas station on, with a variance on my property is not a reason to change
But
anything.
you can't do that now anyway.
Well,
It's
sure
not
you can.
legal to do that.
Yes, you absolutely can do that.
It's not legal for me to come to the gas station next to you. It might be in Wetlands where the
If you
zoning
go,
regulations
I said, if
are different.
you go to zoning and get a variance to put a gas station in and they give it to you, it's absolutely legal.
No, it doesn't.
It does. I'm sorry, but it does. That's why we have PDDs.
now, are you,
Because they do things like that.
are you a reporter? Okay.
Should.
Do we have public comment in this meeting right
No.
now?
This is
Okay.
a workshop.
Right.
So that's our process. So the first thing is to get, let's give Jordan something to do. He's bored.
Honestly, guys, yeah, after
We're
this
gonna have to
week,
write this up
after
so that
this
it
week
makes
of
some kind of,
classes, and
some
I
kind of
think I
sense.
spent 3 hours going through emails today, so I'm pretty tired. Whatever you, yeah.
but
I'm
we do
bored.
need, a description of what the proposed boundaries would be
Yep,
in a way that a normal person reading that will understand it, with a decent map could figure it out.
a description, a written description of what the delineation.
Yeah.
Yep,
I mean, you don't have to give a meets and bounds across the southern property line of Canpack,
right.
but it does have to say across the southern property of Canpack and then up or straight across to.
It'll have to be pretty descriptive as
Yeah,
to not,
It should
you
be
know,
descriptive
create
enough that
any
a normal
ambiguity.
person could take it and understand it.
Yep. And then that'll be submitted to the DEP.
Right.
or their review. And then upon, their response, and I will be contacting the DEP. I cannot for the life of me remember the person who was assisting me early on in this process, but I will be contacting them again to gather any insight from them that they might have for stuff like this. Maybe, in discussing this with them, they determine, I've not seen an expansion like that, or this is well within the realm of what we've seen, and, we'll take it from there.
And as soon as we get the descriptions, we are going to have to then use the property maps and notify each owner of a property on which the original line from the water company was expanded.
And this is
And they have to be notified in writing,
every property, not just residential.
every property, including the town.
That brings me to another comment. I've read these a couple of times, and I am struck by the amount of administrative duties that this is going to bring to the staff. So if we're not gonna really, we're not really at the point, I guess, tonight where we can really know the full extent of that. But I think we should probably schedule another work meeting where we try to develop some sort of a flow chart for what we need to do to get to the end of this. And I suspect that when we do that and look at the amount of time that's gonna be involved, we may need to sort of bring the selectmen into the loop and
you're
say
right.
to them for the next year, 6 months, 9 months, whatever it is, that you may have some additional staffing requirements because we're working within given deadlines, and we have 24 different things that need to get accomplished within that time frame.
And he's already doing two jobs.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, if we're not at the place where we can really do that tonight, I think that has to be sort of the subject of our next meeting, perhaps.
I agree. I do think, once this is up and running, there won't be that many issues except for the already existing commercial facilities.
Correct.
Agreed. It'll just be maintaining the permitted activities, which have a 5-year run life.
Right.
But getting it set up, letting people know.
It's gonna
Getting
be
to that
arduous.
point, there's a
Publications
lot
and all
of
that. It's gonna be
reporting
freaking
a lot of cross-reporting responsibilities and, different things that are gonna have to be worked out, and those things
And to
take
Donna's
take
point,
time.
similar municipalities meet once a year in order to
Yeah.
govern what you guys are being tasked with. And to Bill's point, it's gonna be arduous at the beginning,
Yeah.
setting this up and getting it off.
I mean, if you just go to look at, page 27, those are all the different types of applications and revisions and renewals and so forth that,
And
we have to have the administrative things worked out to handle.
And how will this dovetail into the Inland Wetlands and Waterways Commission? Like,
We have nothing to do with each other.
so we have to meet separately
Yes, we
I
have
think
to.
on a quarterly
We
basis?
talked about this before. We think what we'll do is we'll piggyback them so that, let's say, January, April, July, September, we'll have a wetlands meeting, and then we'll close that down, and we'll start up the next meeting.
Same day.
Okay,
Hopefully, there really won't be that much to cover.
right.
We might, if we start getting busy on the other side, we're gonna have to do more than one meeting a month.
Well, maybe they'll have to get a new commission.
We're in.
They won't create maybe a new aquifer
I
protection.
don't think the Board of Selectmen is going to go to the effort of creating another commission and trying to recruit people to sit on
I
it.
think
Yeah, you're
the
right.
busy part is gonna be getting this thing set up initially. And after it's set up and
Yeah.
and everybody's notified and everything else, it's gonna be relatively low-key.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we're probably only going to have 2, maybe 3 dozen registered activities in these aquifers, if I had to guess.
I think you're right, because most of it's outside the area.
Residential.
So it's just getting all the administrative ducks in a row, so to speak, that's gonna be time consuming.
Yeah,
And we have to do it within time constraints, so.
Well, the one thing we can do, and I don't see any reason we couldn't do this if we really run out of time, is publish the original maps without the commissioner's approval. Because they're automatically approved.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can go in and send in our request to amend the maps outside the 120 days, if we have
Well, why
to.
don't we take as much of the 120 as we need first?
Well, I think
and then-
that's what I'm saying.
and
I want,
then
let's
we
keep it
can-
rolling.
Okay,
I want to
all right.
avoid
So
some-
you have a contingency plan. If we end up against the clock, we can submit the maps as is and then take our time to work
Yeah,
on.
I would want to actually call whoever's running this thing at Deep and say, look, we're out of time, here's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a problem with that?
Yeah,
And then I think they'll say, no, you don't really have a lot of choice. It's like, we're going to have to check with them and tell them, look, I know what the regulation says, but there's no way the publication we're going to put out is going to have detailed maps on it. That's just impossible. So we're going to refer it to the town clerk's office, or I guess Wetlands, actually, to have extra copies available for people who want them.
And can they post copies of the maps on the website?
That's a thought.
Because we could
but-
say.
but-
we
But
could-
there
we-
are people who don't have computers.
I figure
We
we,
have to do both.
yeah, so I'm just saying, like, you could put the best map
Yeah,
that'll
that'd be
probably
fine.
not be super helpful, but then it's like, and for a better resolution map, go to www.
Yeah, something like
Town of
that.
Southbury.
I'm just saying, you can't do what the regulation says, because
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, frankly, you
Republican
could
is not gonna put
follow,
in 6 pages of free maps.
you could follow this link right here and see any aquifer protection area anywhere in Connecticut,
okay.
so. Shouldn't be.
So we'll use that. That's good.
We could use that. This is the GIS that's employee only, so standard, citizens don't get to see as much information as here.
And
Then
could
we can, in the office, we can have a bunch printed up,
Yeah,
because you have to show both. You have to, I guess you could show both on one map, but the original and the amended.
do you know
So
if the
they-
public library keeps maps at all? Could we just print out a series of maps and just say, and then donate it to the public
I
library?
think we have to do something like that. I don't think we're gonna get that many inquiries, frankly.
Okay.
Most people aren't gonna
It
care.
real, I don't see there being such a detraction when it comes to residential properties, unless.
I don't think it's gonna
Unless
be
you're
an issue.
operating a small engine business, which even then, there's permissible levels to which you can conduct what you're doing. This has very little to do with residential property value. What we're doing here is to monitor use of predominantly commercial and industrial uses as to not,
But we may get
influence the
comments from
aquifer.
Canpac, or whoever owns that now. That wouldn't surprise me, because they probably don't want to be covered. Heritage Village might raise issues,
they're practically.
but I think their
Solid land.
operations and maintenance stuff is already covered,
I'll
so.
bet it is. I bet the sewer
They
plant
probably
is
won't.
already, have,
Just out of curiosity, are the recharge areas, these are, I would think that they are within these aquifer protection areas, right? But the aquifer protection areas, are they just the wellhead areas?
No, it's the,
So it's the recharge
it's
areas?
it's the
Stratified
stratified drift into which the wells are put. I don't know how you define recharge areas. I don't think they've defined it.
Okay.
I mean, that would make sense. That-
right.
That should be covered, but I don't know that it is.
So you're saying, you don't know whether they're getting wells that are 100 feet deep and getting water out of them, or are they getting 600 feet down, or?
So I think, or these are just large aquifers that are a public water source, or maybe
Yes.
not, they
And it's
service.
limited on that too. It has to service, what is it, 2,000 people or more?
Right, so it doesn't cover like individual homeowners.
Not specifically,
No.
no. It's- yes,
Unless
it's
you're
municipal-
within,
It's municipal or
that's-
commercial wells that are providing large numbers of people. They do have a definition of recharge area.
is there additional aquifer areas in this town that aren't covered under this, these regulations?
I'd be willing to bet you, and I don't bet anybody anything, that there are, because we have swamps. those are recharge areas and those tend to be aquifers, but they're not used. An interesting question, I don't know if you raised this or not, one of you guys did. If Heritage Water Company says, okay, we're gonna expand our operations and we're gonna go down and put a couple of wells up on the unregulated side of Jeremy Swamp Road,
Well, then it gets
then
extended.
does this get amended?
The maps would have to, sure.
I don't know if this covers that, but that suddenly, you could have a big expansion of area. But that's not how it's set up
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
And it doesn't
Depends on how
count,
much
it doesn't
development
count
goes on.
rock wells either.
Well, I would think that Heritage and Aquarian and all these other companies, they've got to know that the state is putting into place all these areas, and so that they've got to know that they just can't simply go and decide that, oh, we're going to pull out 1 million gallons.
Well, yeah, they're the ones that supplied us with the map, so yeah, they know.
They know that,
I don't.
but they're not gonna object, they want this done.
I think once we go through all this and all the other towns get through with this, I mean, I think it's gonna be difficult for Aquarian or any of these people to, all of a sudden decide to change the rules and take out, a whole bunch of water someplace else.
I don't know.
I don't know that I agree with that, but
I think they're gonna have to do what California's doing now, is start taking water out of the ocean and desalinating it.
Oh, that would be cheap. We can't even get electricity at a reasonable price, and they're gonna start desalinating water? I don't think so.
California's got six desalination plants going into effect here in the next couple of years.
It's not a terrible idea for them.
What's that?
It's not a terrible idea for them.
They need it. They need it
Expensive.
desperately.
Expensive.
Okay, are we done? Anything else you wanna talk
I
about
guess
today?
that's that for tonight.
We are gonna have to get together again to talk about
We want
process and
to
how we get this done.
schedule another work.
Yeah, I think so.
Meeting,
I think we gotta
but-
kinda stay on this.
Will this be prior to the next regularly scheduled inland wetlands meeting, or will we
Well,
be scheduling this?
I think you have the next job,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately, which is trying to put a definition of this together.
Yep.
Maybe we don't just schedule another meeting for like 2 weeks?
Okay, is Tuesday good?
Tuesday,
Yeah.
3:30
I
work
think
for
we should
everybody?
stay on this, cause I think there's more here than we,
All right, let's just keep at it and get it
I
done.
think we better.
I don't think
2
we're
weeks?
getting paid enough.
Yeah,
I heard they were gonna double our salary, does that help?
So we're looking at January 31st.
okay.
All
I
right.
think that's okay, let me look.
Sarah, the business which preceded Calcan
Confirm.
Campac.
was Baskin Robbins, and before that was Old Hundred.
Oh, 100, that's,
Also, and
it was, yeah. That was the first one, wasn't it? That's what I
They
thought.
manufactured ice cream, like it was
Yeah,
the,
oh, yeah.
wow, that is cool.
Calendar,
Yeah, it's our first ever Southbury PDD.
January 31, 3:30.
3:30?
All right,
Oh, no, what day is today?
doesn't work.
No, I had something scheduled today that I forgot about.
could we maybe get an answer on the question regarding the pre-existing properties? Such as Calcan.
What question?
Well, there was a remark made about earlier this meeting.
Do they have to register?
Yeah, it was pre-existing, so they did not follow.
I think we actually have an answer in the draft regulations. Let's see, if I can find out who has to register.
Are there towns around here that have already gone through this whole process?
I think most of them, we're behind the 8 ball, that's why
Because we could.
we've been drafted.
If we have any questions or need any help getting focused,
Yeah.
maybe,
Woodbury.
we could get a hold of some, like Woodbury.
What are you looking for, who has to
Yeah, anybody engaged in a regulated activity which commenced or was in active operation in the past 5 years has to register. So the answer is yes, they have to register.
With that 5-year caveat. They have to register.
Well, if they haven't been in operation for 5 years, they don't have to register.
If they have not been in operation for
Right.
5 years,
Yeah, they're gonna be shut down
okay, so they don't have to register?
if they're not operating.
Okay.
If they are operating, they have to register.
Locations that have been in existence, like we were talking about.
Doesn't say anything about that. The regulation says they were in operation. And that's section 8, if you wanna take a look. There are also some exemptions on registration. I haven't read all of this.
Is that also in section 8?
I think so. But I believe that there are some activities that are regulated by the state that don't have to register.
Yes, there are.
And the NIPD's permit is one of them.
Right, that's what I'm discussing.
Yeah. If you already have a permit from the state, you don't have to get another permit from us. I don't think there are many of those in town, maybe O&G.
But they can
Anybody
apply
else?
for an exemption separately. They can apply for an exemption separately.
Yeah. And
Whole other
I don't know that
application process.
Canpack has a discharge permit. I don't know if they're even operating. Is that place operating?
Yeah, they're open.
They are?
They're there, I don't,
Not during Main Street, but they're open.
Well, no, that
I
shut
don't
down
know
a
if
while ago.
they're probably not manufacturing, but I think, thought I saw them advertising space available over there.
I
Two-
think they are.
Two pieces of space available.
Yeah, I had a client who was gonna buy it, but he was gonna use it for warehousing.
It's a really difficult parcel and tenant
I didn't
unit to
even know it
fill
was
out
back there.
because it's manufacturing in the middle of a residential, and it's specific manufacturing based on the regulations set forth in PDD number 1. So it's
It's
just
pretty
a,
restricted.
it's a tough unit to fill out, unfortunately, but that's why they had to amend the regs to just get a simple tenant to be able to store warehousing there.
They do need to be careful there, though, because the back of the property slopes down. and
Into
the stream
wetlands.
goes directly to the river.
Yep.
You don't want anybody doing anything messy. Thank you, everybody.
You
Oh,
bet.
Unless you all want to stay.
Well, as nice as that sounds,
We could,
I bet.
we could have Jordan send out for pizza and beer.
Was planning on doing it anyway, guys.
Good. You deserve it. Thank you.
to be continued.
Oh, add information, right?
What's that? Oh, I appreciate that, Bob.
I just seeing everything, and then this thing, this is like, holy cow.
It's a lot, man, I'll tell
This
you
is
what.
like a lot.
I know.
When I heard the description part, it's all, please.
Nope, it's good.